efficiency, quality, and access in Belize's health system, US $14 million, loan motion 2024. Thank you.
Honourable members, those reports are ordered to lie on the table. I recognize the Honourable Chairperson of the National Security and Immigration Committee.
Madam Speaker, I rise to lay on the table report number HR 259/1/13, report from the National Security and Immigration Committee on the resolution extending the proclamation declaring a state of public emergency in certain parts of Belize City and certain parts of the Cayo District, motion 2024.
Honourable members, that report is ordered to lie on the table.
Public business, government business, motions.
I recognize the Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and with your permission not to repeat the recitals, I now move, therefore, be it resolved that this Honourable House, being satisfied that the loan proceeds will significantly improve the livelihood of the citizens in the targeted communities, including the social and economic integration of migrants, as well as upliftment the tourism potential in the communities, approves and confirms that the government may enter into a loan contract with the Inter-American Development Bank on the terms and conditions set out above, and further authorizes the Minister of Finance to execute and deliver the said loan contract and all other documents associated therewith.
Honourable members, the question is now, therefore, be it resolved that this Honourable House, being satisfied that the loan proceeds would significantly improve the livelihood of the citizens in the targeted communities, including the social and economic integration of migrants, as well as uplift the tourism potential in the communities, approves and confirms that the government may enter into a loan contract with the Inter-American Development Bank on the terms and conditions set out above, and further authorizes the Minister of Finance to execute and deliver the said loan contract and all other documents associated therewith. All those in favour kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it. I recognize the Honourable Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, with your permission not to repeat the recitals, I move now, therefore, be it resolved that this Honourable House, being satisfied that the loan proceeds would significantly improve the health of the population in Belize, approves and confirms that the government may enter into a loan contract with the Inter-American Development Bank and the terms and conditions set out above, and further authorizes the Minister of Finance to execute and deliver the said loan contract and all other documents associated therewith.
Honourable members, the question is now therefore be it resolved that this Honourable House, being satisfied that the loan proceeds would significantly improve the health of the population in Belize, approves and confirms that the government may enter into a loan contract with the Inter-American Development Bank on the terms and conditions set out above, and further authorizes the Minister of Finance to execute and deliver the said loan contract and all other documents associated therewith. All those in favour kindly say aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Home Affairs and New Growth Industries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, with your permission not to repeat the recitals, I move now, therefore, be it resolved that this Honourable House extends the proclamation declaring a state of emergency in certain parts of Belize City and certain parts of the Cayo District made by the Governor General on the 24th of June 2024 for a further period of 2 months.
Honorable members, the question is now, therefore, be it resolved that this Honorable House extends the proclamation declaring a state of emergency in certain parts of Belize City and certain parts of the Cayo District, made by the Governor General on 24 June 2024 for a period of 2 months. All those in favor kindly say aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
Bills for second reading.
I recognize the Honorable Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, this is the Fiscal Incentives Amendment Bill 2024. Madam Speaker, I move the second reading of a bill for an act to amend the Fiscal Incentive Act, Act number 4 of 2023, to provide for exemptions on import duty for foreign managers and foreign skilled workers employed by a person with investment of $250 million and above, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental to. Madam Speaker, I just gave a long explanation of what this bill is all about. Thanks.
Prime Minister, move.
I move, Madam Speaker.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Fiscal Incentives Act, Act number 4 of 2023, to provide for exemption on import duty for foreign managers and foreign skilled workers employed by a person with investment of USD $250 million and above, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto, be read a second time. All those in favor kindly say aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
The bill for an act to amend the Fiscal Incentive Act, Act number 4 of 2023, to provide for exemption on import duties for foreign managers and foreign skilled workers employed by a person with investment of US $250 million and above, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Honorable Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, this is the Insurance Amendment Bill 2024. Madam Speaker, I move the second reading of a bill for an act to amend the Insurance Act, Act number 30 of 2023, to provide for realignment of terminology and internal cross-references, and to amend the provisions for the disclosure of beneficial owners, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental to. Madam Speaker, when I introduced this bill again, I went through a long explanation of what this bill is all about. And if somebody on this side would have any questions, I can go through it at the end of this debate. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, Madam Speaker.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Insurance Act, Act number 30 of 2023, to provide for realignment of terminology and internal cross-references, and to amend the provisions for the disclosure of beneficial owners, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto, be read a second time. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
Bill for an act to amend the Insurance Act, Chapter 30, Act 30 of 2023, to provide for the realignment of terminology and internal cross-references, and to amend the provisions for the disclosure of beneficial owners, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Minister of Human Development, Families and Indigenous Peoples Affairs.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker, and to one and all. Madam Speaker, I rise to move the second reading of the Disabilities Bill, a bill for an act to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of privileges, interests, rights, benefits, and treatment by persons with disabilities on an equal basis with persons without disabilities, to to establish the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, to establish the Disabilities and Equal Opportunities Tribunal, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Madam Speaker, I crave your indulgence before acknowledging special and important persons and before getting into the contents of the bill. I crave your indulgence to add my voice of sympathy and condolence to the family of our beloved Jenny Lovell. Jenny was our first director of the Community Rehabilitation Department back in 1999, and she served with distinction in that role. And she also was currently our senior trainer for our Community and Parent Empowerment COMPAR program under the Department of Human Services. Madam Speaker, she will be greatly, greatly missed, and I add my voice of condolence to all her family and friends. Madam Speaker, I also take this opportunity, and I wish to thank everyone for their patience this morning and into this afternoon. I want to make a special mention of our special envoy for the development of families and children, Mrs. Rosanna Briceño, Her Excellency, who is with us this afternoon. On the last occasion, Madam Speaker, we acknowledged the ancestors, the advocates who went before, and those retired. But I wish this afternoon to place on record before this honorable House a few little facts about our special envoy. She started her career at Stella Maris Government School in Belize City, teaching special needs students at the elementary level. From there, she went on to St. Peter's Anglican for 33 years, 13 as principal, where she oversaw the administration of fully functional special needs center at the primary level. I want to read into the record, Madam Speaker, that Special Envoy holds a bachelor's degree in special education. She also holds a certificate in diagnostics assessment and curriculum development, and her master's in educational leadership from the University of North Florida. Madam Speaker, I want to mention, and the Latin word Stella Maris, of course, stands for Our Lady, Star of the Sea. Stella Maris School was founded in 1958 with Sister Serapia and the Palatine Sisters during trying conditions for persons with disabilities, and therefore the patronage of Our Lady Star of the Sea was sought in founding this special institution. And I really want to acknowledge and commend Mrs. Briceño this afternoon for her stellar work over all of these years for persons with special needs and in special education. Allow me also, Madam Speaker, to mention a few more names. Mrs. Rosa Mon Williams, 47 years of service connected with Stella Maris and special needs students. Marjorie Bernard, 40 years. This is no small accomplishment for all of our ladies, Madam Speaker. Also, Dativa Martinez, Myrna Elliott, Merlene Neal, Eleanor Castillo, Teresita Bradley, Sharon August, and Dana Stain. And they're all connected with Stella Maris. Madam Speaker, I will try to be brief because we did give some information at the first reading of this bill, and I do sit here humbly this afternoon to continue to urge that we pass this disabilities bill today. It will establish the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, and it will have, in addition to government representation, it will have representatives from the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Social Security Board, the National Trade Union Congress, civil society organizations, and also the ex officio member of the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, and our CEO of Human Development will chair the commission. We also want to mention at this second reading, Madam Speaker, that the functions of the commission will be various. And please allow me once more to read it into the record. It will oversee the implementation of the policy to give special attention to persons with disabilities. It will make recommendations to the government. It will coordinate and monitor the implementation of the said policy. It will monitor our compliance with the United Nations Convention and do monitoring and evaluation on the impact of our policy. It will recommend changes to existing laws, support the development of relevant programs, collect and record important data, promote and foster capacity development, promote and coordinate the employment of persons living with disabilities, produce annual reports, address grievances, and maintain, importantly, maintain a register of persons living with disabilities. There will be a registrar. There will also be the provision of appeals to the commission by a person who may be aggrieved. There will be the attention to protection from discrimination. And there will also be attention to protection from exploitation, violence, and abuse. We intend, Madam Speaker, through this multi-sectoral approach to provide lifelong protection and social support for persons living with disabilities. It occurred to me, Madam Speaker, and allow me one more pause to acknowledge Ms. Karen Kane, the newly retired head of the Youth Enhancement Services. Ms. Karen is now a double amputee, but she has not given up her commitment to working for the girls and the families of this country. Although a new director has taken over at the Youth Enhancement Service, we honored Karen Kane yesterday for her many, many years of dedication and service, and we welcome her continued input and inspiration to the girls and women of this country. I'd also like to mention, I would also like to mention, Madam Speaker, that there will be access through this multi-sectoral approach to education and training, and the focus again on the right to education and training for all persons living with disability. Access of examination for persons with disability, and the ministry will make the necessary adjustments in terms of employment, health care, and also very importantly, accessibility. And it reads thus, Section 34, access to public buildings, public transport, and premises. Persons with disabilities shall have reasonable access, both indoor or outdoor, where any public service or transportation service is offered. Existing public premises shall be altered to facilitate accessibility within 12 months of the commencement of this law, and persons with disabilities are not to be charged any higher sum to access public transportation. Failure to comply will be made an offense. Now, Madam Speaker, I would like to mention that clearly accessibility to buildings would not include your Panades or Garnaches shop. but it would include public buildings, whether government or private, so that we make the reasonable adjustments. Now, we're not telling everybody that if within a year you don't put in a ramp, we're going to send you to jail. But reasonable is the operative word here. So large companies, large buildings, if the access is not on the ground floor, then we must make the reasonable attempt to make our public spaces, especially the larger spaces, accessible to persons with disability. And I wanted to, in particular, to mention that because we must signal our seriousness. The law provides for complaints to the Commission, alternative dispute resolution, and the guiding principles as set out in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities shall be the guiding principles in the making of any decision affecting persons with disabilities. A member of the Commission, the tribunal, the registrar, or any person acting under authority must maintain information obtained by virtue of the roles and responsibilities that they hold. They must hold this information in confidence and with professionalism. And finally, no action, suit, prosecution, or proceeding shall be brought against the government, the minister, the commission, tribunal, registrar, or any member of the commission acting on behalf of those named in respect of any act, neglect, or default or omission by a person or body in such capacity acting in good faith. Madam Speaker, let me wrap up by again acknowledging our special envoy who has been patient and has been here since before 10 this morning, everyone who has attended for this important legislation, and to say, Madam Speaker, that clearly this bill is not a magic bullet. However, so not every single problem will be solved overnight, but we as a country are making it crystal clear that we must focus on our persons with any kind of disability, mental, physical, emotional, in whatever form. We must give that focus, and we must commit ourselves to inclusion and equality. With that, that is my contribution at this point to the debate, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank you very much, and especially all those in the gallery.
I recognize the member for Freetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to place on record my full support for this very, very important historic bill. I want to commend the Minister of Human Development, the entire team at the Ministry of Human Development for their tireless work on this very, very important issue, and for advancing this bill through consultations, through cabinet, and now here at the National Assembly. I want to, of course, place on record as well my own gratitude to all those who for many, many, many years, many decades have toiled on this issue. Many of them have gone before us. I think the Honorable Minister, when she first introduced the bill, mentioned many of them, but many people who were deeply committed to us having a Disabilities Act. I want to commend those people. And I want to, of course, join with the Honorable Member for Belize Rural Central in recognizing and acknowledging the tremendous advocacy and work of the Special Envoy, Mrs. Briceño. I have had the privilege and honor of working with her, so I know how passionately she feels about this issue, and she's been a very strong and effective advocate quietly for many, many years. Now she's, of course, in a more leadership, more visible role, but she's been doing a lot of good work for many, many, many decades. So I want to acknowledge her. I've learned a lot about this issue from her and observing her. So I thank her. And I want to acknowledge as well my friend up there, Marshall Nunes, the great Marshall Nunes, who now is, the head of the disabilities desk. Marshall as well has been a champion and advocate for people with disabilities for many, many years. He's an inspiration, despite his own disability, being visually impaired. He has not missed a step. He has kept moving forward, kept working, maintained a very positive outlook on life, and he's been an inspiration to so many other people. So I'm very, very proud that, he's a part of our team, and he gets to work on the front line of this important issue. So thank you, Marshall, for your work and your advocacy. And I want to thank all the other people who are here, people from the special education unit of the Ministry of Education, who I know are deeply, deeply committed to this issue. Right. The athletes with medals, yeah. Thank you, Minister. Yeah, we need to acknowledge them as well and thank them for their work. As the Honorable Minister said, this bill is very, very important. And it's a very, very progressive bill. We talk about protection from discrimination, protection from exploitation, from abuse, from violence. These are basic, fundamental rights. Sometimes we take them for granted. But I don't think, unless you engage with people in the disability community, unless you have a family member who is disabled, or someone, you have a friend who is disabled, I think we don't fully appreciate all the challenges that people in that community face in terms of discrimination, abuse, violence, exploitation. So it's very, very important now that we have this piece of legislation which will seek to protect them in meaningful ways. Minister mentioned as well access to education and training. Again, these are basic fundamental rights. We have to ensure that our people with disabilities have access to quality education, to opportunities for training. Very, very important. Employment. We have to make sure, sometimes we send them, we equip them with school, we equip them with skills, we make sure that they go to school, they even get into high school, but then they come out of high school and, there are no opportunities for them to work, to find meaningful employment. So again, this is something that's an important and integral component of this bill. Health care, something again we may take for granted. They have to have access to health care. Very, very important. Equal access to health care. And then as the Minister mentioned, the basic, things we take for granted coming up here today. I'm sure Ms. Kane had difficulty coming up here today. basic things, access to public buildings. Another big one is access to public transportation. You know, it's very, very challenging for so many people with disabilities. You know, they need to rely and depend on other people to help them. And unfortunately, that's not always available. So these are very, very important issues that we need to address. And I'm very, very happy that this bill that we're passing today, the disabilities bill, captures all of this that I'm talking about, seeks to address all of this, puts in place the legal framework to underpin this commitment to ensuring equality and equity for these individuals in our society with disabilities. Of course, it's a law, it's just a law. So we have to continue to be vigilant, we have to continue to work, because it's just like any other piece of legislation, it's just law. We have to implement it. We have to make sure that, that it is carried out, that the legal obligations that are in here are in fact enforced, so that there can be a meaningful positive change in the lives of these individuals. You know, and in wrapping up, Madam Speaker, you know, I want to you know, mention a few individuals. You know, I grew up, you know, my father was visually impaired, certainly for the last 30 years of his life. But again, like Marshall, he was a man who didn't miss a beat. He carried on, very inspiring, and he reached out to a lot of young people to try to help them with their disabilities, especially those who are like him, visually impaired. So that he taught himself how to read Braille, and he taught other young people to read Braille. So frequent visitors in my home were people like Donovan Renault, who I think still has a show on Love FM. I think he have the midnight shift. Donovan Renault. These were frequent. I remember Donovan coming to my home at the age of, I think he was 13, when a horse kicked out his eyes. He was in the back of a trailer and a horse kicked him in his head and he lost both of his eyes. Imagine that happening at 13. And he came there trembling to my house. You know, and so I've maintained a relationship with, I was about maybe the same age. We've maintained a relationship ever since. I remember Hector Hoare, Mr. Hector Hoare, who has gone ahead of us. Frequent visitor to my home as well. Teresita Mo. Teresita lives in Benke. Still there in Benke. Teresita Mo. You know, all of them were there. Charlie Chiak. I don't know where I lost track of Charlie. I don't know where Charlie is, but where is he? Hattieville? Okay. Very good to know. You know, so this bill is for all these people. This bill is for all of these people. And at the end of the day, what we want is to ensure that every person in this country with a disability, whatever that disability is, that they have an opportunity to lead a full, productive, happy life in our society. They should not be denied any opportunity because they are a disabled person. And this bill, I am very, very happy to support, because this bill provides the framework for us as a society to seek to ensure that these people with disabilities are treated fairly, with compassion, with dignity. So I'm very, very proud, Madam Speaker, to join in supporting this bill. I thank you very much.
Minister?
Madam Speaker, I ask that the question be put. Is that the correct thing? Yes. Or Prime Minister?
I'll be very short, Madam Speaker. And certainly I want to put on record my support for Disabilities Bill. It is a bill whose time has come. And for too long, and we have seen many families would hide their children that have disabilities. And in some instances, it's very, very sad. I remember a case in Orange Walk, twins, two beautiful little girls, and they just hide them at home because they were both blind and had many other problems. And again, thanks to Rosanna, I've had a first-hand appreciation of the challenges that families have with children with disabilities. And Madam Speaker, this is a bill that affects everyone. And know that the honorable member from Freetown has mentioned his father. It reminds me of my father too, who also got a stroke. And for the last 11 years of his life, he had to have 24/7 care and attention because of the stroke. There's not much he could have done for himself. But I have to give him credit because he never liked to stay home. So I had two big men. He was a big man, but I have to have two big men walking, holding him, bringing down the steps. And he goes around with his wheelchair going all over the country. But there are few people that have that support from the family. It's very costly. But now that we have this disabilities bill, and I must commend the honorable member from Belize, Rural Central, who has been her passion from way back as 1998 when she was the then minister in the first Musa administration. And now here she comes now for the second time having responsibility for this ministry, and now making sure now that this comes to fruition, that this bill will soon come into law. I ask everyone, I ask people in sports, people in education, in business, for us to be able to be aware of this law that we're passing and to reach out and to support all our Belizeans that have these challenges with their disabilities. Madam Speaker, I proudly support this bill.
I recognize the member for Toledo West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I also want to rise in full support of the bill that was presented by the Honorable Minister. Madam Speaker, as a former educator and somebody who spent a lot of time, working with students and persons who were in one way or the other affected by certain disabilities, I want to say that today is a very progressive day, and it is a day that is going to go down in history as this government, took the bold step to ensure that we put in place the necessary legislation to protect all persons, who have some form of disability, and essentially saying and, making it known that under the Constitution, all persons, all Belizeans, whether you have a disability or not, we're all equal before the Constitution. So this is a great day, Madam Speaker. And I too want to join in congratulating certainly the Ministry of Human Development and everybody else who has worked very hard to ensure that today we can have this bill being presented in the House. I also want to thank and recognize all the advocates, all the NGOs, civil society, and everyone else who worked very hard, to support this entire process. Essentially, Madam Speaker, what we are seeing today is that the bill clearly outlines government's responsibility to ensure that each and every Belizean, who has a disability is equally protected under the Constitution, and that there is an obligation of the state to ensure that those elements of protection and support are put in place. So I believe that that is very important and historic. I also too want to associate myself with the statement made by the Minister of Education and the member for Freetown, because as I sat here and I heard Minister making her presentation, I too remembered Hector Hoare, he was a classmate of mine. We went to Teachers College together. And, I vividly remember him that, he being visually impaired did not, prevent him from, fully, ensuring that, he pursued an education and that he contributed, to the education and well-being of many other students and persons who had disabilities. And I too want to join in the many other persons, in recognizing, the many other persons who, have gone ahead of us, who have championed the cause of, disabilities in our Belizean society. So I also too want to join in recognizing, Her Excellency, Ms. Rosana Briceño, Marshall, and everybody else who is in the gallery here today, supporting this very important piece of legislation. So, Madam Speaker, it is a historic day. I congratulate the Minister. I congratulate our government for being very progressive and supporting and ensuring that all Belizeans are equal before the Constitution. God bless Belize, and together we continue to build a better Belize.
I recognize the Minister.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much, everyone. Before moving the second reading, Madam Speaker, I would just like to acknowledge that the valedictorian at Wesley College, Alyssa Fisher, who is visually impaired, is here today. May I then, with your permission, Madam Speaker, move the second reading?
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of privileges, interests, rights, benefits, and treatment by persons with disabilities on an equal basis with persons without disabilities, to establish the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, to establish the Disabilities and Equal Opportunities Rights Tribunal, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto, be read a second time. All those in favor, kindly say aye. Aye. Those against, kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
The bill for an act to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of privileges, rights, interests, benefit, and treatment by persons with disability on an equal basis with persons without disability, to establish the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, to establish the Disabilities and Equal Opportunity Rights Tribunal, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Human Development, Families, and Indigenous Peoples Affairs.
Madam Speaker, I would like to move the second reading of a bill for an act to make new and robust provisions for the prevention and protection of persons from sexual harassment, to provide for a right of redress for any person who has been sexually harassed, to repeal the old Protection Against Sexual Harassment Act, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Madam Speaker, it's been a long time in coming. This new act, because the old one was from back in the 1990s, but this bill, the new one, Madam Speaker, seeks to address and enhance measures concerning sexual harassment, aiming to update the existing law to meet the changing needs of society. Unlike the current Protection Against Sexual Harassment Act, which deals specifically with sexual harassment in employment, accommodation, and institutions. The new bill addresses sexual harassment also in the workplace, as well as other circumstances or business transactions. Madam Speaker, this bill includes the cyberbullying and photos and unwelcome messages that are now a part of the social media phenomenon here in the 21st century. But the bill also looks at sexual harassment, protection against sexual harassment and anti-sexual harassment when seeking or receiving goods and services, when seeking accommodations, in transactions relating to real and personal property, while being a member of an association or organization, during employment or vocational training, and while seeking the services of an employment agency or an authority that is responsible for professional certification. Under the current legislation, complaints of sexual harassment, Madam Speaker, are made directly to the court. However, in this new bill, which we believe is progressive, the bill seeks to resolve complaints of sexual harassment through alternative dispute resolution where appropriate. If a person considers that he or she has been sexually harassed in any of the circumstances under Part 3 of the bill, that person is able to make a complaint directly to the employer or person in charge of the institution or organization where the sexual harassment allegedly occurred, who is then obligated to investigate the complaint and refer parties to the complaint conciliation or mediation if there is evidence of sexual harassment. This provides the parties with the opportunity to resolve the complaint without a trial and on terms that may be mutually acceptable. Madam Speaker, to safeguard against bias and to ensure that a person alleging sexual harassment against a person that is not employed by the other person, the bill also allows for complaints of sexual harassment in those instances to be made directly to the court. Complaints of sexual harassment in any of the circumstances in Part 3 of the bill that goes before the court are dealt with as a civil matter, and the court therefore has the power to make orders as to costs, damages, or any other order, direction, or declaration. There is sufficient flexibility in the bill, Madam Speaker, that one can look for a section where the specific complaint would come under and be able to have recourse in that regard. Complaints of sexual harassment that are not in relation to the circumstances specified in that part of the Act are triable summarily in the Magistrates' Court. Similar to Section 4 of the current bill, which is going to be the outgoing one, Clause 16 of this bill holds an employer liable for acts of sexual harassment by an employee or agent of the employer. However, the liability of the employer is not automatic, and the employer is not strictly liable for the actions of his employee or agent unless it is shown that the act of sexual harassment occurred during employment and that the employer knew of the sexual harassment and failed to take steps to prevent the continuation thereof. Madam Speaker, again, we are signaling the seriousness with which we take this matter. And believe me, Madam Speaker, this whole issue of sexual harassment is alive and well. And just as we are taking action in relation to the criminals in society, we also have to take action against those people who believe that they can get away with harassing people in a sexual nature. Other salient features of the bill would include the obligation of the employer to implement a sexual harassment policy, and the bill provides a template for that, and to maintain a register of complaints made. Again, Madam Speaker, this would not apply to your mommy and daddy panade shop, but it would apply to large businesses. It will apply to government. It will apply to the private sector to make sure that across the board we are signaling that we are serious. We can also hold persons criminally liable for making a false complaint, so that we have to put in the law as well. And we also, we also make it an offense to victimize a person who has made a complaint of sexual harassment or to pressure someone to engage in sexual harassment. Madam Speaker, let's be serious, and I ask our House of Representatives today to support this new bill. Again, it is progressive. It sends the signals that we need to follow through. As with the disability legislation, it's not a magic bullet, but if we are serious about protecting people from sexual harassment, then let us do this today. I'd like to thank everyone again for supporting. I ask the members on this side of the House. It's so unfortunate that we don't have members from the other side here today. But you know what? That ain't going to stop the work of this government. Madam Speaker, that is my contribution at this time, and I do ask for the support.
I recognize the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, this is a part of the work that we had already on Plan Belize, and again, work that the Honorable Minister has started way back in 1998. It's unfortunate that it took so long to be able to bring it to the House, but it's something whose time has come. And, and sexual harassment is mostly against women, but also men are also sexually harassed. So we have to also take that into consideration. So this is something that protects everybody, both men, women, at home, in the workplace, in public, wherever it is. And in school, yes, exactly, in school, where a lot of times we get complaints from parents about the harassment of their children in school, mostly daughters, but children in general. We had a long discussion about this in cabinet, so it's not something that we just are passing just for passing, but we have to make sure that we can cover all the bases and that it is something that can work in Belize, it can work in the workplace, it can work in schools and wherever it is, to ensure that we can give the protection that our citizens need against sexual harassment. Madam Speaker, I commend the Minister on her work and I support this bill.
Minister.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has had anything to do with this. It wasn't just one person or one ministry. Madam Speaker, I now move the second reading, with your permission.
Honourable members, the question is that the bill for an act to make new and robust provisions for the prevention and protection of persons from sexual harassment, to provide for a right of redress for any person who has been sexually harassed, to repeat the Protection Against Sexual Harassment Act, to repeal the Protection Against Sexual Harassment Act, Chapter 107 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2020, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto be read a second time. All those in favor, kindly say aye. Aye. Those against, kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
The bill for an act to make new and robust provisions for the prevention and protection of persons from sexual harassment, to provide for a right of redress for any person who has been sexually harassed, to repeal the Protection Against Sexual Harassment Act, Chapter 107 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, revised edition 2020, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Honorable Minister of Public Utilities, Energy, Logistics and E-Governance.
Madam Speaker, this is the Southern Deep Port Development Facility Bill 2024. Madam Speaker, I move the second reading of a bill for an act to provide for certain exemptions from taxes and duties proposed to be granted to the Southern Deep Port Development Limited by the agreement, to provide for the effective implementation of the Southern Deep Port Development Facility, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Madam Speaker, when I first introduced this bill, I gave a very lengthy explanation of it, and so I will now give way for a debate or for comments on the bill, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member for Dangriga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A pleasant afternoon to colleagues and to all in the gallery. I rise on behalf of the wonderful people of Dangriga, Hope Creek and Sarawi to express our gratitude for the support that we have received in reaching this point. The Commerce Bight Port, as it is known, has been dormant for over 2 decades. It is an asset that of considerable value with great potential that now we are finally going to be activating again for the benefit of the residents of the constituency and certainly of the country at large. Madam Speaker, we would like to start out by thanking Prime Minister John Briceño, who has kept his promise to our people to reopen the Commerce Bight Port. As he himself has said, we have made promises and in the past and nothing has been done. But this administration is about action. This administration is about looking out for our people. And of course, one of the ways to do that is through investment and through jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. At the end of the day, our people need jobs so that they can take care of themselves and their families. And the leadership of our Prime Minister is unquestionable when it comes to creating jobs across our country. And certainly in our constituency, we are most thankful. On behalf of our people, I would also like to thank all colleagues, all of our colleagues on this side who have given their support. I know in particular Minister Shabat, Minister Koi, and Minister Mala were tasked with reviewing this project, and they did their due diligence, and we are certainly thankful that it is now where it is today, thanks to you all. I would also like to thank our people on the ground, Madam Speaker, who also played an important role in getting us to where we are now. From our constituency office, we have, of course, Ms. Debbie, who is here with us, members of our executive who have been firm about this being a high priority for Dangriga and surrounding areas. Our elders in our community. Today we have Aunt Elder with us, who is one of the persons in our community highly respected and has been a stalwart in promoting all these things that we have been doing. So thank you, Aunt Elder. Thank you very much for your leadership. Of course, other members who could not make it here today, I would like to thank them. Aunt Fel, Mr. Eligio, Mayor Kashan, Mr. and Mrs. Roy Cayetano, Phyllis Cayetano, have also been very, very firm about the things that we need to get done in Dangriga. I appreciate that they have reminded me constantly that these are the things we need to do. Huh? Yes. And so, I also want to thank the Southern Workers Union, who came on board very early, and led by Mr. Lewis and his team, they have been very, very adamant about the reopening of the Commerce Bight Port, and we're here finally, at the final stages. Of course, the investor, Mr. Basilio and his team, who took the step to put the resources where we need it most to get this thing off the ground. I will just close briefly here now, Madam Speaker, by just saying that the impact on our community is going to be significant. We cannot overstate this in terms of the number of jobs, employment that will be created, the connection with the multi-purpose park. Again, thank you, Minister Marla, for leading there again with the soon-to-be multi-purpose in terms of it groundbreaking, where indeed we will be having a state-of-the-art facility that will see significant employment, restaurants, stores, recreation facilities, amphitheater, etc. That will link up very well with this project, with the small cruise ships that are coming in. These are people who spend quite a bit more than the larger cruise ships, and so we want to have those facilities in place of international standards that we will be able then to serve our international visitors and, of course, our local visitors as well. We know many times that when people come to the south, myself, my colleague from Stan Creek West, Honorable Ferguson, we know that people bypass Dangriga and they go to other places that are more developed, like Hopkins and Placencia. And now, for the first time, we will be having the appropriate facilities where people can come and truly have a good quality time in Dangriga. Now I look forward to our colleagues in the Senate, which will come next week, supporting this bill. Of course, we have our very own Senator Jang from Dangriga, who herself has been a strong supporter. So thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, the people of Dangriga say Sereme. We say thank you. Muchas gracias.
I recognize the member for Stan Creek.
Madam Speaker, I also rise to support this venture. And they say when your leadership have no vision, the people perish. Dr. Zab has become the representative for Dangriga, and there is some significant stride. And I could remember that port was open, it was about 25 years ago, it closed its doors. And most of the stevedores were from the town of Dangriga. Ever since it was closed, they were clamoring for it to be open. And now it's a time for that to be done, especially with the decline of the citrus industry. That is a testament that the representative is trying to make sure he provides jobs for the people of Dangriga. And I sure also spin off to Stan Creek West because we are neighboring constituencies, and whatever we have, we share together. So I want to say that I support this initiative 100%.
I recognize the member for Toledo West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I also rise in full support of this bill, and I want to say that I am very happy that the day has come that this concept, this idea, has finally come to fruition. And I want to congratulate Minister Shabat, the member for Cayo North, for his vision certainly for all the people at his ministry who have toiled and worked very hard, to ensure that, this bill comes today to the House. And everyone else involved, certainly the investor, this is significant for Dangriga. I can recall, campaigning 2008 onwards. And every time we went to an election in Dangriga, the cry was, we want the port to come back. We want the port to come back. And finally today, historically, under our People's United Party government, we are delivering on that promise to the people of Dangriga, Madam Speaker. As my other colleagues have said, certainly it is going to create, a great level of economic activity for the town of Dangriga in so many aspects. Tourism is going to certainly increase. We're going to see, the business people, certainly seeing better economic activities, whether it is the restaurants, whether it is the promoters who promote the culture. Dangriga is such a very wonderful place, rich in culture. And I am certain that, the people of Dangriga are going to ensure that they maximize this opportunity, to portray to the world what a wonderful and beautiful culture Dangriga has as a part of our country. But, Madam Speaker, I think it would be remiss of me not to recognize and to thank one of our very own who sadly went ahead of us a couple days ago, and that is the Honorable Mike Espat. I want to truly recognize him and thank him for his great efforts, because Honorable Mike Espat was always a part of the discussion and was always an advocate to support the reopening of the Dangriga ports. So, Brother Mike, I know you're smiling, you're watching at us. We thank you and we salute you. We will always remember you. May God continue to bless Belize and Dangriga, and I salute and congratulate Honorable Shabat for this wonderful bill. Thank you.
Minister?
I move the question.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to provide for certain exemptions from taxes and duties proposed to be granted to the Southern Deep Port Development Limited by the agreement to provide for the effective implementation of the Southern Deep Port Development Facility and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto be read a second time. All those in favor, kindly say aye. Aye. Those against, kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
The bill for an act to provide for certain exemptions from taxes and duties proposed to be granted to the Southern Deep Port Development Limited by the agreement to provide for the effective implementation of the Southern Deep Port Development Facility and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Committee of the Whole House on Bills.
Honorable members, the House will now resolve into a committee of the whole House to consider the bills that were read a second time. Now, normally when we reach this juncture of a House meeting, I would ask that the visitors in the galleries leave during this portion of the sitting. The cameras will be turned off, audio is turned off. However, this is a rather unique sitting in terms of the visitors in the gallery. In my recollection, and having checked with both the clerk and the deputy clerk, this is the first time the galleries represent inclusivity in such a manner. It would naturally not be possible for some of our members in the galleries to excuse themselves. Therefore, I will crave the indulgence of members as I utilize Standing Order 91, and I will ask that we respect the reality of members in the gallery in terms of mobility, access, and that they remain while the cameras and audio is turned off.
Bills for third reading.
I recognize the Honorable Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I rise to report to the Committee of the Whole House. I rise to report that the Committee of the Whole House has considered the Fiscal Incentive Amendment Bill 2024 and passed it without amendment. I now move the third reading of that bill.
Honourable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Fiscal Incentives Act, Act Number 4 of 2023, to provide for exemption on import duty for foreign managers and foreign skilled workers employed by a person with investment of USD $250 million and above, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto be read a third time. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
The bill for an act to amend the Fiscal Incentive Act, Act Number 4 of 2023, to provide for the exemption on import duty for foreign managers and foreign skilled workers employed by a person with investment of US $250 million and above, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Honourable Minister of Human Development.
Madam Speaker, I rise to report that the Committee of the Whole House has considered the Disabilities Bill 2024 and passed it without amendment. I now move the third reading of that bill.
Honourable members, the question is that the bill for an act to promote, protect and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of privileges, interests, rights, benefits and treatment by persons with disabilities on an equal basis with persons without disabilities, to establish the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, to establish the Disabilities and Equal Opportunities Rights Tribunal, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto be read a third time. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
The bill for an act to promote, protect, and ensure that full and equal enjoyment of privileges, interests, rights, benefits, and treatment by persons with disability on an equal basis with persons without disabilities, to establish the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, to establish the Disability and Equal Opportunity Rights Tribunal, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Honorable Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I rise to report that the Committee of the Whole House has considered the Insurance Amendment Bill 2024, passed without amendment.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill... Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Insurance Act, Act Number 30 of 2023, to provide for realignment of terminology and internal cross-references and to amend the provisions for the disclosure of the beneficial owners and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto be read a third time. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no.
The bill for an act to amend the Insurance Act, Act Number 30 of 2023, to provide for realignment of terminology and internal cross-references and to amend the provisions for the disclosure of beneficial owners and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
Honorable members, I recognize the Honorable Minister of Human Development, Families and Indigenous Peoples Affairs.
Madam Speaker, I rise to report that the committee, I rise to report that the Committee of the Whole House has considered the Anti-Sexual Harassment Bill 2024 and passed it with amendments. I now move the third reading of that bill.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to make new and robust provisions for the prevention and protection of persons from sexual harassment, to provide for a right of redress for any person who has been sexually harassed, to repeal the Protection Against Sexual Harassment Act, Chapter 107 of the Substantive Laws of Belize Revised, Edition 2020, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto be read a third time. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
The bill for an act to make new and robust provisions for the prevention and protection of persons from sexual harassment, to provide for a right of redress for any person who have been sexually harassed, to repeal the Protection Against Sexual Harassment Act, Chapter 107 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2020, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Minister of Public Utilities, Energy, Logistics, and E-Governance.
Madam Speaker, I rise to report that the Committee of the Whole House has considered the Southern Deepport Development Facility Bill 2024 and passed it with amendments. I now move the third reading of that bill.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to provide for certain exemptions from taxes and duties proposed to be granted to the Southern Deepport Development Limited by the agreement to provide for the effective implementation of the Southern Deepport Development Facility and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto be read a third time. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
The bill for an act to provide for certain exemptions from taxes and duties proposed to be granted to the Southern Deepport Development Limited by the agreement to provide for the effective implementation of the Southern Deepport Development Facility and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
Recognize the Honorable Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Honorable members, before I put the question, I would like to acknowledge the names and where they came from, the sign interpreters. It has been a historic day in more than one level, but the sign interpretation has allowed the House meeting, the full House meeting, to reach Belizeans who simply would not have been able to follow today's proceedings. Those interpreters are Mr. Nathaniel Davis, who has a degree in interpreting, and he's from Cayo. He can raise his hand so that those in the chamber. We have Kristen Hernandez, a young woman who spent her first year interpreting for students in Orange Walk. Kristen, you can stand. And we have Robert Garbett, who has been an advocate for the deaf community for many years. He learned sign language as a teenager and has been active in the community ever since. I mentioned before that today was a historic day. It is one of the more inclusive days for this assembly, which struggles and has struggled since its inception to be accessible to all peoples. This would not have been possible without the support of the Special Envoy, Her Excellency Rosanna Briceño, the counselor from Orange Walk, Councillor Dorrit Pascasio, and Special Education Unit Officer Christy Almeida. The Office of the Speaker has worked very closely with these three individuals in trying to get sign interpretation introduced to the National Assembly, but more importantly to ensure that we could have had members from the disability community present both at the last meeting and this meeting. So I thank you. And my last request, members, because I said it was a historic day, it is the last day for our humble clerk, Mr. Eddie Webster. I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to join me below in front of the dais so that we can acknowledge his service properly and photograph.
Speaker, can you indulge me just to say a few words here in the National Assembly to recognize the work of the clerk with Eddie Webster, and as I said earlier to his family, we did meet in the best of circumstances way back when I was the Minister of Natural Resources. But despite that, I've never, I must tell you, ma'am, that he's a gentleman, that at no time did I ever feel any sort of animosity or that, he's holding a grudge against me. And that even when I was in the leader of the opposition, and especially the first part of the Bar administration, they were quite mean. They were not. The clerk never did allow that to influence him, his behavior with us in opposition. He was always helpful. And kind, that I never felt, any sort of, my turn, no? So I want to put that in record, and that even when there was a transition to a new government, that transition was smooth. And you immediately said, well, you're here to work with the government of the day. On behalf of our government, on behalf of our Belizeans, I want to thank you, Mr. Webster. I like to refer to you as Eddie. And certainly to your family. Thank you so much for allowing us, this gentleman, to spend so many years in public service. Thank you, and may God continue to bless you always. Thanks.
I will invite the Prime Minister as we hand over a plaque of appreciation on behalf of the presiding officers, the parliamentarians, the staff of the National Assembly. And then I will quickly move to close so that, of course, Mr. Webster, your family can join you for official photos inside the chamber, as well as the staff. Indulgence, members. The question is now that the House do adjourn. All those in favor, kindly say aye. Those against, kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.